In the fog-drenched streets of 1888 Whitechapel, the whispers of Jack the Ripper's gruesome acts had only just begun. But there was something more sinister lurking in the shadows, something that twisted the familiar legend into a terrifying new form. As the bodies piled up, the city became a canvas for a killer's twisted masterpiece, one that would leave an indelible mark on history. The cold wind howled through the alleyways as the first body was discovered, a gruesome tableau that would haunt the city for decades. Detective Alistair Montgomery stood over the body, the smell of decay mingling with the sharp scent of rain-soaked earth. His eyes scanned the dark corners of the alley, the feeling of being watched creeping up his spine. The dark and foggy streets of London were eerily quiet in the early hours of August 31st, 1888, as Mary Kelly stumbled her way back to her small room in the slums of Whitechapel. The thick fog was so dense that it obscured everything more than a few feet away, giving the surroundings an otherworldly quality. It was so quiet that every sound echoed, amplified, and distorted. Her footsteps echoed down the empty street, a hollow clack that seemed to bounce off the walls of the surrounding buildings. I heard the sound of her heeled boots clicking against the cobblestones, and my pulse quickened with anticipation. From my hiding place in the alley between two shops, I could see her hurrying along. She seemed a little drunk as she swayed, doing her best to remain upright. The shadows around her seemed to flicker and dance, and I could barely make out her features in the dim light. I knew what I had to do. The wooden handle of the knife felt cold and slick in my hand, and I tightened my grip on it. The chill of the blade was a comforting, reassuring sensation that cemented my decision. Mary got closer, and I could smell the stench of alcohol and vomit wafting from her. She stopped next to the alleyway to throw up violently for a few seconds. The sound of her heaving mixed with the eerie silence, creating an unsettling atmosphere. She braced against the side of the building as she caught her breath. Then she stumbled forward, back on track. That's when I made my move. I stepped out of the shadows and grabbed her from behind. She didn't even get the time to scream. Her throat was already cut before she was able to look into my eyes. In that moment, she didn't look like a whore. She looked like a child. The fog seemed to thicken around us, muffling the sound of her body hitting the ground. The street lamps flickered, casting weird shadows all around us. The surroundings seemed to blur, and I felt a sense of disorientation as I stared down at her lifeless body. There is a certain innocence that begets sudden death, and in that moment the whole world seemed to be holding its breath. It exhaled slowly as I knelt by her side and slid the knife across her throat a second time. But that wasn't enough. I pierced her chest, her abdomen, all over her torso. Her blood spread like a slowly forming river over the darkened streets, staining the cobblestone perfectly. Just one last thing, I thought to myself. I cut into her lower abdomen, through her layers of clothing. I peeled away the clothing and admired the slices in her skin. The knife easily tore away her flesh, and I quickly retrieved the cradle of life, her womb. "Thank you," I whispered to her softly. I leaned in and kissed her gently before disappearing into the shadows. The next day, no one, young or old, could shut up about the ghastly scene, the brutal murder that took place last night. Mary's name was on everyone's lips as scared people scurried and scampered like mice throughout the streets. As the investigators sifted through the crime scene in 1888, there was something about the alleyway that unsettled Detective Alistair Montgomery, and it wasn't just the violated corpse within the chalk outline. The air felt colder than it should have been, even though it was late spring, and a heavy, almost tangible silence hung in the atmosphere. He ran his gloved fingers along the walls, which were dotted with what appeared to be strange markings, circles within circles, lines drawn in a way that seemed almost intentional, though no one could make sense of them. One of the constables, a young man with more eagerness than experience, pointed out an odd detail near the victim's body, a small symbol carved into the ground beneath her. It looked like a crescent moon, but within it was a series of cryptic lines that seemed to shimmer slightly in the lamplight. Detective Montgomery had never seen anything like it in his years of service. He asked the constable to take note of it, but as he stood there, his stomach churned. The markings seemed oddly deliberate, and yet there was no explanation for them. They were not the work of a mere deranged killer. No, these were symbols of something older, something unnatural. Montgomery's boots scraped against the cracked pavement, the sound too loud in the otherwise silent alley. The air, thick with the smell of decay and wet stone, felt strangely heavy as he approached the graffiti-covered walls. It wasn't just the dampness that pressed down on him. It was something else, something he couldn't put his finger on. As he crouched to examine the symbols etched into the brick, his fingers hovered, not quite touching the ancient-looking markings. They weren't just painted tags, not like the ones he saw every day in his line of work. These felt deliberate, precise, as though the artist, if he could call them that, had intended for someone to find them. Someone like him. The paint was this strange, iridescent substance he didn't recognize. He felt an odd sensation crawl up his spine, a shiver that wasn't from the chill of the night air. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled, and for a moment it seemed like the shadows around him shifted, like the alley itself was watching him. His instinct screamed that this wasn't right. It wasn't just a gang marking, a territorial warning. No, this was something older, something that shouldn't have any place in a city like this. Montgomery's eyes scanned the symbols again. They weren't familiar, too intricate, too foreign. The jagged lines twisted in on themselves in a pattern that felt almost alive, as though they were shifting with his gaze. He leaned closer, barely suppressing the urge to step back when the symbols seemed to pulse faintly, almost imperceptibly. His breath caught in his throat. This was beyond anything he'd ever encountered. No, this isn't simple, he thought, his hand shaking as he pulled out his notepad to sketch a picture. This is something else. For a moment, Montgomery wondered if he was losing his edge, letting his imagination get the best of him. After all, he had worked tough cases, murders, missing persons, corruption, but this felt different. The weight of the alley, the pressure that seemed to fill his chest, was as tangible as the rain that had begun to fall. It was as though the very air was soaked with something otherworldly, something he couldn't explain with logic or experience. He stood up quickly, rubbing his eyes as if to clear the fog that seemed to cloud his thoughts. The alley stretched before him like a tunnel, dark, endless, and full of secrets that didn't belong in the real world. And then, in the corner of his eye, he saw something, a flicker. It was gone before he could focus, but the sensation lingered, like a presence just beyond the edge of his vision. His heart raced. Montgomery wasn't one for superstition, but there was something undeniable about the way the alley made him feel. Something ancient, something powerful, something that whispered that he had crossed a line, and that the case he was working on now was no longer just about catching a criminal. It was about uncovering something that was never meant to be uncovered. And for the first time in his career, Detective Montgomery wasn't sure he wanted to know what lay at the heart of it all. The seventh murder was easier for me to execute than Mary and others that followed. I never found out her name, though. I knew she was headed toward a bathhouse a few streets over. That gave me just about 5 minutes to procure what was needed without it happening too close to her destination, where people would be expecting her. I watched her from the shadows, my eyes locked on her figure as she made her way down the deserted street. The fog was so thick that it seemed to swallow her up, concealing her from view for a few moments before revealing her again in a ghostly silhouette. Every now and then, the dim orange glow of a street lamp flickered to life, casting her features in a sickly hue. The buildings around us loomed like giant monoliths, casting deep shadows that seemed to stretch and twist in unnatural ways. The narrow alleyways between the structures yawned like dark, gaping maws, offering shelter to who knew what kind of horrors. I could feel the weight of the buildings pressing down on me, suffocating me with their oppressive presence. Even I could tell this was no place for a woman after dark. My heart beat faster as I crept closer to her, my feet making no sound on the slick cobblestones. I could hear her footsteps echoing down the street, a lonely sound that seemed to reverberate through the entire city. Her breath came out in quick, shallow puffs, and I could sense her fear building as she realized that she was being followed. I reveled in the feeling of power that it gave me, the knowledge that I held her life in my hands. The blade of my knife glinted in the dim light, sharp and deadly. I could almost feel its thirst for blood, its desire to taste the warmth of her flesh. She turned a round corner and disappeared from view for a moment, and I felt a sense of panic claw at my chest. Had I lost her? No, there she was, just up ahead. I quickened my pace, closing the distance between us. The fog seemed to swirl around her, obscuring her even as I drew nearer. I could see the bathhouse looming up ahead, and I knew that I had to act fast. With a sudden burst of speed, I lunged forward and grabbed her from behind. She let out a scream that echoed off the surrounding buildings, but it was cut off as I sliced across the back of her neck. The knife was sharp. It almost cut right through to the front in a single swift slice. Her head fell forward in a too enthusiastic nod, but never raised again. The fog seemed to thicken and swirl around us, concealing our gruesome dance from the world. With her chin on her chest, I watched her body sway on the spot. The street lamps flickered in response, casting eerie shadows all around us. As she fell to the ground, I felt a sense of elation wash over me. I was a god in this twisted, dark world, a master of life and death. The surroundings seemed to blur around me, and I felt a sense of blissful disorientation as I stared down at her lifeless body. The fog swirled and danced, casting strange shapes and shadows all around us. I knew that I would never tire of this feeling, this rush of power and control. The knife vibrated gleefully in my hand as I punctured her torso over and over. The knife lay there in my loose grip as I observed my masterpiece. This is a work of art, I thought to myself. The tip of the knife scratched jerkily at the skin of her lower abdomen. Its movement, its hunger, almost making it fall from my fingers. I felt him trying to awaken within this body, so I quickly grabbed the knife and felt him fade away again. Back in control, I fully appreciated the beauty that lay before me. With no more time to lose, I retrieved my most precious bounty, her womanhood, our most sacred altar, from her body. By the time I got to the 11th womb, there was nowhere you could go in this city where someone would not be talking about the serial killer. I mean, what artist does not want their work to be truly appreciated? And the fear and solemnity with which they spoke of my craft proved to be the highest form of appreciation. Just one more to go, I thought as I held the 12th womb in my bare hands, the scent of fresh blood strong and savory on the night air. The scent must have been a lot more pungent than I thought, as I saw a tiny, starving stray puppy hobble on its two meager legs toward the body at my feet. The puppy's tiny legs quivered, unable to fully manage the weight of its body. It regarded me, the way dogs do, tentatively testing whether or not I will share my kill. It never took its eyes off me as it started to nibble slowly at this woman's wide-open torso. I knelt down slowly and scratched behind its tiny ears. This is good meat to feed the hungry, I thought. The body lay on the cold slab, untouched by the world outside. I approached, hands steady, heart calm. This was a necessary act. She was a vessel, like all the others before her. In the end, it wasn't about death, no. It was about release, about what came before. I reached for the blade, tracing the familiar pattern along her abdomen. The womb, I thought. The place where life begins and where it ends. I had seen it all too clearly once when I was young. The woman I had loved, the one who had carried me, had died there. And then she was reborn. Not in her death, no, not in her death, but in what came after. The sacrifice, the offering. She would return to me as they all would, and then the ritual would be complete. The cauldron bubbled thickly under the moonlight. The smell was of death and fertility. The broken promise of new life as I lowered the 13th womb into this weeks-long stew. This 13th womb was the easiest to procure because I always had it. I was preparing it, that final piece of the puzzle to ensure my return to this realm in another 100 years. She has eaten of the womb of each of the other 12 women throughout these past few weeks. Of course, she had no idea that her husband hadn't really been her husband since the night of the first woman, Mary's death. So why would she suspect foul play when her husband served her meals? She wouldn't. She never did. She ate their wombs, willingly preparing herself to be the final, most important, most willing ingredient. Instead of spending an eternity in hell, I get to create hell on earth for a few months every 100 years, as long as that is, I make my sacrifice. Do you know what passion is? My passion is my art, but without a body to host a soul, how can I create art? So every 100 years, I pick a body to host me so that I can create. But that's just what's in it for me. In reality, I provide wombs to hell, 13 human wombs within their reproductive years every 100 years. There is an army being made in preparation for a time far beyond your lifetime. We plan to win the war, 13 wombs each century to bring new life into ranks of the underworld. 100 years later, another set of bodies found. This time, it wasn't the alley that held the secret, but a forgotten mansion at the edge of town. Detective Emily Wilson stood in the overgrown garden, staring at the house's broken windows. She had read about the 1888 murders countless times, but standing here, in this place, she could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. The killer's legacy still lingered, and it seemed to be far from over. It's 1988, the city of London was buzzing with excitement as the 100-year anniversary of the infamous Jack the Ripper murders approached. The media was abuzz with speculation about the identity of the mysterious killer who terrorized the streets of Whitechapel in 1888, and conspiracy theories abounded. But for Detective Inspector Emily Wilson, the anniversary held a deeper meaning, especially since there have already been 12 Jack the Ripper-esque murders in the previous months. The thought that plagued her mind the most was, why would someone want to mimic the Jack the Ripper murders 100 years later? Emily had always been fascinated by the case, as well as the legends, and now she thought she had a chance to finally unravel its secrets. Emily stood outside the Metropolitan Police headquarters, staring up at the imposing building with a mix of excitement and trepidation. She had been assigned to a new task force dedicated to investigating the new Jack the Ripper case, and she was eager to get started. As she walked through the hall, she felt a chill run down her spine. The ghost of the Ripper seemed to haunt these walls, and she wondered if she was getting in over her head. But Emily was a seasoned detective, and she wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. She plunged into the case with a fervor that surprised even her colleagues. She pored over old case files, interviewed witnesses and experts, and delved deep into the history and culture of Victorian London. She thought that taking a deeper look at the 1888 case would give insights into what London was experiencing in the present. She became obsessed with the case, working long hours and neglecting her personal life in the pursuit of the truth. Emily paced the small apartment she shared with her husband, her mind swirling with the evidence she'd uncovered earlier that day. A dozen new leads, none of which made any sense, yet all of them tugged at her curiosity. She hadn't even noticed that her husband, Thomas, had been standing in the doorway for several minutes until he cleared his throat. "Emily, we need to talk." She turned, startled, her face tight with frustration. "I don't have time for this now, Tom. The case is... The case again? You've been on it for weeks now. You're losing yourself in this. I haven't seen you in days." He stepped forward, his voice softening. "I miss you. We need to talk about us, not just the case." She felt a pang of guilt, but quickly masked it with determination. "I can't stop now. If I let this go, someone else might." "You think I don't know? I'm just asking you to come up for air once in a while. I'm worried about you." but Emily was already retreating back into her thoughts. "I'll be fine, Tom, I promise." As the door clicked behind him, she stood in silence for a moment, guilt gnawing at her. But then her pager buzzed with another update from her partner on the case, and she was pulled back into her world. The obsession had already taken hold, and it wasn't just about solving a mystery anymore. It was personal. Too personal. Emily sat in her office, poring over the old case files, when she noticed something odd. One of the photographs, a grainy image from 1888, showed a group of witnesses at the scene of the murder. A strange symbol, barely visible, seemed to glow faintly on the wall behind them, something she hadn't noticed before. The more she looked at it, the more it unsettled her. It wasn't the symbol of any known criminal group or gang. She flipped the page, but her thoughts lingered on the strange marking. It was similar to the facts her partner sent her earlier that afternoon. She couldn't be absolutely sure because the people in the photo were covering most of it, but she was pretty sure it was the same. She made a mental note to look into the image further. The next day, she got home late from work again. She dreaded the talk she was sure her husband would want to have. She had no time for this now. She sighed heavily as she forced herself to enter her own home. Her husband was home as she had expected, but he didn't seem upset. She paused, looking at him, anticipating the next fight over her job. However, he was patiently waiting for her with her favorite mutton stew. She was relieved. She didn't want to question it. She kissed him gently on the lips. "Wow, this is great. I could get used to this. You have been making this stew a lot more often. I like it." She grinned at him as he served her. "That's why I do it, my love. I know you have been really stressed about this new case. I just want to do what I can to help out." "Ah, you do more than enough, darling, and I know I've been preoccupied and neglecting you, and I'm sorry." "No need to apologize, my love. I know you've been stressed, and I know your job is important. I'm sorry for not being more understanding." Emily nodded, tears of relief and happiness in her eyes. I watched through the eyes of her husband as she consumed the 12th womb. I could feel the knife in my pocket as it quivered with anticipation. Thirsty, it was so thirsty. I wrapped my hand around the cold wooden handle and felt powerful. I took the knife from my pocket and moved towards her. She looked up at me. "What's that, darling?" She curiously eyed the wooden handle in my hand. The blade was turned away so she could not see it. "You mean this?" I asked as I deftly slid the blade twice across her throat. She gurgled softly. In her eyes I could see the curiosity give way to shock. Then shock begat uncertainty. Then uncertainty begat realization. Then realization begat horror. As I punctured her torso repeatedly, horror flowed into panic, then disbelief, then death. With centuries of practice, I skillfully removed my prize. It's now the 21st century. Oh, what a time to be alive. 1888 was not the first, and 1988 will not be the last. As I wait for my time to come again, I watch, I observe, I learn more about the people, the world, and how it has changed. But some things will forever remain the same. I procure wombs for hell, always 13 every 100 years. I am Jack the Ripper. See you soon.